Hello, guys, and welcome to another Multiplayer Monday. I'm George Gonzalez, and I'm obsessed with making games. And today, we're gonna go on part two of the series. We're gonna actually start diving into the multiplayer stuff. This is the good stuff. We are gonna turn what we saw in the last video into a multiplayer version. On top of that, we have this spawner in case you wanted to generate NPCs rather than placing them in the scene, like spawning them as a wave, like horde mode and stuff like that. So let me show you what we have in single player, and then we'll walk through the scripts and how it all works out. Okay, so we have this NPC generator that will have a prefab and an area where this area determines where the enemy will roam. And then let's hit play and watch. And we'll go into all the details on how to change this to multiplayer, what things to watch out for. So that's the biggest thing, is because yeah, you can spawn 15 enemies, but we're gonna go and do the exact same thing that we just did here, but in multiplayer. And it might seem like you're not getting anywhere with these because you made so little progress, but actually it's a huge deal that you can do these things, because the whole point of multiplayer games is to be able to do what you can do in single player, but with multiple people and still sync it. So that's the main thing, is oftentimes when you do a multiplayer version, it looks worse because of sync issues or variables are not correct, and you go crazy. The main thing that I do want to stress is when you're doing these, especially for enemy AIs, is that you do a lot of the debugging at the beginning in first as a single player version. Because if you just straight out do enemies AI as multiplayer, or even if you do multiplayer AI like a networked AI, you still want to debug it in like a single player scenario, because there's a lot of things that will go wrong that has nothing to do with the network. And so you might be debugging the network stuff only to realize that the base is not correctly set up. So there's things that are not working in the single player version, regardless, so multiplayer is not the problem. And so that's the first tip that I would give, is watch out for those, because if you get in too fast and you add too many things, it can get really confusing really fast. So let's go into, so we have this generator, right, that generates NPCs. And we talked about the NPCs before. The setup is pretty straightforward. We have a NavMesh agent. We already looked at that. The NPC that connects the animator and the agent, and also the Wander script. And this is what decides where to go. And the area needs to be put in at runtime. So this is a good scenario for multiplayer games that I want to go over, because if I were to, let's say, remember when we talked about this script, we mentioned that we could go in here at the bottom and just add our own logic, right? Like we could say random point, right? Whatever we decide the algorithm is, we can add it there instead of grabbing a different class. But the reason why I like this is because oftentimes when you're making your own network stuff, you're like, but I want to do this specific thing, and it doesn't show in the video, right? And so this gives you a lot of things to think about that then you can do later with your multiplayer setup, and it's a good lesson. And so I want to go over this first. When you spawn an object, you're like, oh, it needs this. But oftentimes, and I've done it before in other videos, but you need to kind of pre-warm it or have it ready before it even spawns. And it's like, how do you do that if the object is networked? It doesn't behave the same way as when you instantiate, because you have to network it across. So that is the first thing we're going to look at. You have two decisions. When something's hard, you can either discard it and try something else, or you can figure out how to make it work. And oftentimes there's a cost, right? And after a certain point, you're like, okay, no, like we can't keep spending money on this. So hopefully this will give you a new tool in your arsenal so that you don't have to stop. You can actually think through it and fix it and do what you want to do. That's the whole idea. So we have this generator. We're going to pin that. Okay, so we have the two. And this is, so the first thing is, okay, I need to spawn member, right? So right here, we have generator and network generator. Okay, so the first difference obviously is that it's a network behavior that gives us access to the runner. You don't have to, but I need this right here, the runner. If you can have a reference to the runner, then you don't need the network behavior, honestly. But this ensures that it only happens on the master client only once. So for example, I have other scripts that are not mono behavior, or they are, but they spawn regardless of who happens. So like every time a player comes in, it will spawn an enemy. So that way, if there's 5 people, it'll spawn 5 enemies. So that's something you can do. But anyways, we have the network prefab, same as the other one. We have a prefab, NPC prefab, and this one's NPC network prefab. We have an area, the same thing, right? We're gonna load the object with this area. And this is how we do it. And it seems pretty simple, but I wanna explain to make sure you understand. We have this on before spawn. And most other, even if you're not using Fusion, most of the network solutions have some kind of pre-warm or before spawn so that you can load the asset with the necessary components. Because if I go like this at the bottom, no dot, and do this, right, get area, we could do this because I only need it on the master client. But sometimes you need this to be on everybody. Let's say this object is going to switch host or master client, who owns it. If it's going to change authority, this needs to be on everybody. Okay, so this is a good way to just kind of make sure it happens before you start, because this will not be guaranteed to be there when it spawns, because it does the spawning and then it adds it. Okay, and the reason why we want it before is because we have in this network wonder, we have in here the change state, and we have this network function that has on render. So this is like the update version of Fusion. Okay, and in this is kind of like constantly going through. And so the other thing is, if you didn't preload it, and here we have a setup and we have the area. If we didn't have the setup beforehand, let me go back. So right here, see we have the, you can either set it up, so I can do this. If you didn't want to do one-to-one, you could do setup, but I don't need that setup anymore. And then I would do the area in there. So you could do either way. The reason why I had this setup is because I had other components that I was testing with. It's up to you how you do it. Instead of lining up everything in here, you could just do one setup function in here again to set everything up that you need here. But this is not being used right now. Okay, so that's the main thing. So let's say I did not have this set up, or I did not add this beforehand. So let's say we didn't have this, right? This right here. Let's say we don't have that. The other way that I would do it in here, you would have to do all these fancy things like you have like a private Boolean, like is ready or something, right? And then it's false. And so if it's not ready, if not ready, oh, it's trying to do it. Oh, there it is. Return, right? So if it's not ready, it would return. That we could do that, right? And then at some point in here, we get the area and it goes. Or you can do like, you'll probably be like, oh, that's dumb. You could have just checked the variable. Yeah, we could have checked if we had an area instead, right? If there's no area, return. And so then when it has an area, it will start doing stuff, right? We could do that. But then you might be like, oh, well, why isn't it setting it up? Why is it not doing what I asked it to do? And there's more complications, but those are the options that you have, right? You have more tools in your arsenal now. You know about like this logic is not always guaranteed to be when you want it to be. This is guaranteed before. And then if you don't want to do this, you can do other ways, right? Or if you're going to set it up here, you can make sure that the component in here is like that you have to understand the logical sequence of events so that you're not triggering something before something else, if that makes sense. And I remember when I first started Fusion and other, I was really confused because I was adding different variables at different points and I didn't understand that. And so you always have to wait for spawn, for things to start. And then if you're doing things on update or fixed update, this is what you have to check for things and be aware of that. Because that's one of the first things that I did while I was doing this. I was just like, oh, wait, how do I have to add this? Because oftentimes you'll just do runner.spawn like this, right? You don't need any of this. So you'll usually just spawn it like this and you don't even need the reference, right? But as you are like, well, I need more logic. Okay, and then you can start adding stuff as you go, okay? So now you know that. Okay, we have this spawn and all it does is picks up position and rotation and it spawns. And we're gonna go by the count. Okay, so we're gonna spawn 15. The only difference is that we have this override on spawn. So this is important for Fusion. It has to be spawned before it has, so that the runner is ready. It means that the player's connected. Otherwise, things will go crazy. So that is the main thing. Now let's dive into the actual player and the animations and how we sync all that stuff. Okay, so as you saw, and then in here we have the networked Axeman. So this is the final version, the MPC. This has at the root, and you'll notice the difference between the previous Axeman that I showed you that's in here. This was a working test where I was just doing the base movement of how you can do this without any scripts. I would have done it before I knew all these things, right? As you can tell, let me show you the difference just so that you understand. Like this is me like how I usually do it, which is not good. I have all these network stuff and I update. This is the root motion one, right? And so this is me trying the root motion and failing at it. But it's all the same thing. It's just we are trying to update the animator and doing other things with the network. And it ended up not working, okay? But with this one, we have more organized setup, right? We had in here, let me show you the scripts as we look through these. Enemy, network solutions. So these, I created similar components to the other. So it's a mirror version of the NPC setup, but with network variables. Okay, so you have NPC networked, network animator, and wonder. So in here, we need to make sure we have the network transform to make sure that we are taking care of that over the network. So that way this moves with the nav mesh agent. Okay, so now we have this network. We make sure it's spawnable, is master client in case we need to change state authorities. We do that, but we don't have a logic for that. So what we're going to do is when the state authority leaves, it'll be destroyed. So this is where if you wanted to change state authorities, then we have to do something else. We have to do on change. Okay, but We are not going to deal with that right now because it'll make this video too long. But I can tell you where we would change that if possible. Okay, so let's talk about the PC network, MPC network. We have in here the same thing as before. We have a nav mesh agent and an animator. When it's spawned, it enables true and false. The reason why we do this is because the client doesn't need the nav mesh agent. Okay, or otherwise it would do multiple different paths, right? So the state authority is the one that overrides that to true. And the reason why I set it to true by default is that if this is not on by default, it will not be linked to the nav mesh path. And so what I want to do, you would have to, if you're enabling this, you need to make sure that it's set and it's on the nav mesh so that it's working. So there's a few checks that you have to do beforehand. So I just don't bother. I just make sure it's on by default, but just in case I turn it on and then I turn it off. We do the same thing with the get speed to match the two. So like everything's the same, at least in this scenario. Okay, we have the animator. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Like when you do network behavior, it seems pretty straightforward. And that's what I like about this is that it makes the network solution a lot simpler, okay? Because we're doing the same thing. We're just like tweaking it a little bit to in the specific places that we need. So I have this network component. Let me pin this so we can dive deep. We're gonna dive in. This is the version that, remember when we do let me see the MPC, okay, MPC component. All it does is get the component in the parent, right? And it gets the MPC. It's the same for this. In here, we do the same thing. But as you notice, we have this override spawn. And we have this on every client. And honestly, we don't need to have it on all the clients, but just in case, like this would be in case I need to switch over, right? So because it doesn't matter who's who, I want to make sure that every time a player something spawns, you have access to it. Now, if you don't want it hacked, right? Like if you're doing host, a host server, you say it has state authority, you can put this here. And that way it doesn't give access to the MPC to the other players, although you can still look for it, right? In the same way that this is getting it. So it's not a huge deal, but it gives less access to the client. And if you wanted to do it on the server is the only one that would have access to all these classes. The client would never see all these components. And that would be the nice thing is that you would do all the logic on the server side, and then you relay the transform and the network and the animation parameters, which I'm going to show you in a second. In here we have the animator, which is what we talked about before. This is the one where it has like a slight tweak because we're inheriting from this MPC. We are also networked already, and that's why we're using Fusion. In here we have the network variable, the speed. So we changed the speed to be a network variable because this speed is then used on every client because that's a variable that we need for the animator. And that is a difference on all the things. So when you have a branch, a behavior tree, anything that you have, regardless of what tool you're using in single player, if you want to do it in multiplayer, you have to be aware of those. Those are the things you have to sync. You don't have to sync the logic. All you have to sync is the variables that are going straight to the animator and the logic that's the transform, right? The movement. Those are the two things. And so with network transform, you take care of that. Even if it's server side, it'll just relay where the player or the AI is. And then for the animations, you have to do this. And the only thing is that you want to make sure that those are synced, right? So if you do one before the other, it gets complicated. In this scenario, we're doing it on an update. Again, render is the update version of Fusion. I think it doesn't happen on the client either way, so it doesn't matter. But just in case, I have this check. If it's state authority, it will change the speed. So this is the difference between just setting it straight in here. We just do the slight tweak. And add it to the client. See, it's super simple, which I love. Like I can understand this, right? We went from this to just adding it in here and setting a network variable, okay? Not too difficult to understand. And that's the great thing about decoupling all these classes is that makes it easier to understand where you need to network there. Okay, and the last thing we need to talk about is the MPC wonder, and that's it. So the wonder is the one that determines the location. Again, this only needs to happen on the server if you want it. So it could only be server code. No one has to know about this. The only reason I have it in here, well, I have it, but what I'm doing is I'm doing if it has state authority. Other than that, it's not going to do anything, right? If it doesn't have state authority, it's going to return. Sometimes you're like, well, I don't want them to see the code or whatever. You can create a fishnet has like where you can code the client and the server side within the same script. It'll separate them when you compile the game. Fishnet has some nice features for that if you didn't want anyone to like see your code in the client side. Okay, and that's it. Like I know it's super simple, but I think this is a good base start. And I love these scripts because of how simple it can be. And now the other thing is that I can't hit play and have it work. It's not going to work. What's going to happen is I need to go back to the scene to load it because it's Fusion. You might have other setups save, um, 0 side quest loading. So what you can do is you can set up a way to like load automatically. With Fusion, you just have to do this. With other like Fishnet, but you will still have to connect. So you have to find the connect logic. And sometimes you have in your game a loading scene before you go into it. Even with Fishnet and stuff, once you do your host, your server, and if you have a server authoritative, you have to build the server, upload it, and then run it, right? Or you can have a build in your computer that you connect to. But even that is difficult because your computer might have firewalls and you have to connect. And so like it gets very tricky really fast. And one last tip, if you want to really perfect this, because right now I'm just making sure that things are set up and are working the same way on both. Because again, like the animations are not perfect, obviously, and there's still some foot sliding and stuff like that. But at this point, I'm just trying to worry about other components and making sure you understand the network aspect. So in here, as you notice, all these are 15 are networked and 15 are not. Okay. And they're all running the same. So if I can show you, we have the animator in here that gives me the numbers. So it's almost at 2 most of the time. Network, they're all pretty much the same unless they're stopping. See, this guy stopped, he's at 0, and then it speeds up. And this is why like there's some like foot sliding is because there's no either turn animation and the speed is the only thing driving it. So it's either starting or going. So there needs to be a faster, you could do like a faster acceleration. Let's see with this guy, if it changes, we can do even more acceleration. So then it goes to the walking faster. See, but then there's also the rotations that we don't have. And so there's definitely some sliding. And then I think he might be going too fast. So like we could do this 1.5 and see how it works. So you can always finesse it. There's a lot of tweaking that has to happen. See, and now it looks better with the walking, right? Less sliding. And you just need a turn. So tweaking the numbers and the animations and going back and forth as to like what these thresholds are is a good setup. So see how this is like a 0.5, maybe it could be in a different threshold. So that is what you have to play with before, like to fix the sliding and whatnot, and to make it clean. So you could do that. But the whole point of this is to show you that now we have the same setup, right? And so as you tweak the single player, you can fix the multiplayer too, because it's the same animator. Almost everything's the same. It's just you're networking the flow, the Boolean, and then the transform, which is interesting because there's no tutorial out there on some of this stuff. And I want to go dive deep into all this and how to connect it so that you understand how to do this. If you've already done AI for single player, but you're like, I have no idea how to do that in network, this is something that's easy to test without having to have the rig or the player there. Like I have it in there, but I can hit play and understand what's going on and see if it's working. And then I would test it with a client and see, oh, is this behaving right on the client? And next week or next Thursday, we're going to go over the single player version of Formation. So how do you follow a group leader, and then networking that. And it's going to be it's great. And then after that, we're going to go into behavior trees. And then maybe what we'll do is we'll jump from, because most of the tutorials in the videos that I've been following is how to make your own behavior tree, which if you want to learn how to do it, you can, but it starts getting complicated really fast. We can still network that. But the other thing we can do is also there's paid assets that save you time. So like $90 or even $145 for an asset is not bad if you look at all the things that you have to do to set it up from scratch, it'll save you time. And those $145 is worth it. And then we're going to go on how to network that. So those are some ideas or in the future that's coming, but we're going to do a lot of cool stuff with this. And we're going to learn the single player version that's already out there in multiple videos, but then how to network it. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Is there something specific you want me to cover? If you need help with your games, you know where to find me. I'm on Endgame Devs, school community where I help developers finish their games. So see you in the next video.